Now, what do you mean by the word statutory itself? That means mandatory, by stature, by nature. We will talk about the classification as in terms of the registered company, the licensed company and the foreign companies. The limited liability, the limit comes only to the extent of which the liability is held by the shareholder. That's a very big multinational company. Most of you might know it. It's the leading company in terms of baby care products. Good morning and welcome to the third session of Business Environment, and we have been talking about the different forms of companies altogether. And here the types of companies are going to change now, as we have seen about with the Indian context and environment. Now let's try to go a little bit broader on this context and try to understand the different formats of companies that have been registered all across. Now, starting with the chartered companies and the statutory companies. Now, these are two important formats that we have to learn in terms of classification of the companies. Why is this necessary for us? What is that is making us a difference altogether? Now, when the British were ruling our country, everything that needs to be declared as a company, declared as an entity, needs to have a royal decree, needs to have a royal approval altogether. It has to be under the Chartered Act altogether. So that's why the chartered companies started coming into picture. Now, when I say the chartered companies set up as a result of royal charter, which has been granted permission by a king or a queen of the country, are known as chartered companies. So that's why the East India Company, the Bank of England, these are all chartered companies because they come under the approval or permission of Her Highness the Royal Majesty herself. So that is how these are all the chartered companies, approval by a king or a queen by itself. Of course, after the rule of British, when India gained independence and we became a democratic country altogether, we abolished this chartered companies altogether. Moving forward, we started coming into an interesting form called as the statutory companies. Now, what do you mean by the word statutory itself? That means mandatory, by stature, by nature. So statutory means that by nature, by the fact is this company. So these are set up by special acts of the parliament or state legislature called as statutory companies, like the Reserve Bank, the LIC insurance corporations and the Unit Trust of India. These are all these companies which are created under the special act of the companies. Now, why is these companies called as statutory in nature? Why? Because they have a specific purpose that has been identified by the government of India, and these companies are meant only for that particular nature of business. Now, when you look at a Reserve Bank, it is not a commercial bank, but it is the monitor of all the commercial banks in our country. It is considered to be the apex of the Indian banking scenario. Similarly, if you look into the Life Insurance Corporation of India, that is a company which has been set up by the government of India exclusively in the business of insurance. Now, they have been decided, they have been created in such a manner that they will go forward and look into the businesses related only to that particular factor. Now, when you look at Unit Trust of India, that was a mutual fund based organization created by the government for a specific purpose. So whenever the government decides to create a specific company, the railways itself, or when you talk about Reserve Bank or Life Insurance Corporation, these are all being created for a specific purpose which is approved by the parliament. So the parliament now approves, stating that under this particular act, under this particular nomination, under this particular clause, these companies will be established. Moving forward, we will talk about the classification as in terms of the registered company, the licensed company and the foreign companies. Now, when we talk about the registered companies, these are the companies which are registered under the Indian Companies Act of 1956 Or now we are talking about the amendment. Now it is coming at Indian Companies Act of 2013. That is the amended version of it. And these are called as registered companies. Most of the companies in India belong to this category. After 1956, why? Because after the independence, we wanted to amend our own system. We wanted to bring in a system where the companies are governed under a particular law, under a particular system, under a particular governance altogether. So that's why we started bringing in the Registered Companies Act altogether, where we would see that companies have to register as per the prescription, as per the nomination that has been told in the Companies Act of 2013, or the previous one being 1956. Now what happens here is that we are now going to understand that all the companies which wants to register itself under this act, under this purview altogether, will be called as registered companies, and they will be working under this particular clause. So moment you are trying to register yourself as a company under the Companies Act of 2013, all the rules and regulations that have been prescribed under that shall be followed by that company. There cannot be any deviations further. Followed by the licensed companies that come into picture. Now when we talk about the licensed companies, companies established for the promotion of arts, science, religion, charity, or for any other to obtain license under section 25 of the Central Government Act altogether enjoy certain privileges. Now look into the definition. When they do the promotion of art, science, religion, now these are all companies which are trying to work in tandem, in close to the society, in order to promote a specific skill or a specific talent altogether. So what happens here is that they have been licensed by the government of India under the section 25, which tries to go and tell them that these companies need to be running under this particular format. These companies are being registered under this format, and these companies will continue to follow this particular format in terms of delivering value to the society. So whatever the benefits, the privileges that have been mentioned under them, they will be entitled to get it. For example, there might be grants, there might be allowances, or there might be certain promotional aspects which are being given to this by the central government itself. So all those things will come under this particular category. Followed by the foreign companies, a company incorporated outside India under the law of the country of incorporation, having established business in India, we call it as foreign company. Now for example, General Electric, or if, for example, Procter and Gamble India Limited, Nestle India Limited, Johnson Johnson India Limited. These companies are not of Indian origin. They are foreign companies which are located in different parts of their world. Their headquarters, their operational head office might be in some other part of the world, but they want to establish an office in India for their own strategic business purpose. So what happens here is that any foreign company which has its office in India, registered under the formalities, under the regulations of the Company Act, which has been prescribed for them, they will form as a foreign company. So in that case, we also have foreign banks in India, like Citibank, like the Deutsche Bank, or when we talk about HSBC, these are all foreign banks which have been registered in India under the particular act, under the particular nomination altogether. Now, moving forward, we will now start talking about on the basis of liability. We have already spoken in terms of the private and public, but let's now try to understand the liability factor very, very clearly. Now, when we talk about limited liability, that means, let me clarify this factor clearly. The limited liability, the limit comes only to the extent of which the liability is held by the shareholder. So for example, here what happens is that now if I am able to get some money, or if I am able to buy in some shares of a company, in case tomorrow if the company is going to wind up, my ideology or my factor of understanding is that the shareholder will remain limited only to the amount of shares. to the value of shares that he is holding. So for example, if I'm having 100 shares of a company named Titan, my liability towards that company is restricted. That is only to the level of shares that is being held. That's all. So the company winds up to that particular level only, I will be held liable. I will not be liable for the entire company's debts. Followed by unlimited companies. When I say the word unlimited companies, here the liability of its members is unlimited. In other words, their liability extends to all their private properties also, followed by their utmost non-existence these days, because normally people don't want to go on the unlimited liability basis. The reason is that the members is unlimited. Here what they try to say is that the liability of the members is unlimited, which means to whatever extent the liability can keep extending, that will include their assets and properties also, which the members don't want to take into confidence. The members only want to stick to a particular level of liability. So it is always preferred that they go in on the basis of liability. They don't want to go on the basis of, a particular restricted liability. They don't want to go unlimited altogether. That will put them and the company also into trouble. That is the reason today we don't have unlimited companies existing anymore in the Indian business scenario. Followed by the companies limited by a guarantee format. Now, what do you mean by companies limited by a guarantee? That means to say that the liability of the company, of the shareholder, is limited only to the amount he has voluntarily undertaken to contribute towards the assets of the company to meet any deficiency at the time of winding up. Such company may or may not have a share capital. So the shareholder might have given some amount of money to the company during the startup time. So during the wind up, the company will say that yes, by guarantee, I will return back the amount that has been promised to the shareholder. So this is where it is limiting itself by a guarantee, which means to say that with respect to the guarantee, with respect to the amount that is invested by the company, by that person, we are limiting ourselves by a guarantee factor altogether. Moving forward, on the basis of the members, that is the number of members that we are talking about. In a public company, let us also try to understand why public company becomes very, very important here. A public company means a company which has a minimum paid up capital of about 5 lakh rupees and it might be as prescribed altogether. Of course, today the values have gone up with the amendment of 2013 Act altogether. We have gone almost to 5 crores at the starting level. B, it is a private company which has a subsidiary company and which is not a private, which means to say that it might hold a subsidiary altogether, but it is not private in nature. Every public company, as per the Companies Act of 2000 and 2013 amended, with a paid up capital of less than 5 lakh. Suppose if you are having a capital less than 5 lakh, within a period of 2 years after the commencement, they have to enhance the capital to 5 lakhs. Now, if you look into the public company, there are a lot of challenges that one has to understand at the commencement and going forward. Why? Because it is not easy to just go to public or just become a public and appeal to the world saying that I am also a public limited company. If you want to appeal and if you want to tell the people that yes, I am a public limited company, that means starting up from your share capital, starting up from all the basic values, including your paid up capital, the members, the way how the formalities have to be done has to be followed as per the Companies Act. There are a lot of formalities including documentation, prescribing the minutes of meeting, the way it has to be published, the way it has to be brought to the shareholders. All these things have to be met, then only you can call yourself as a public limited company. In case, suppose as per the old prescription, when you started up the company with a short amount of capital, the Companies Act gives the factor that within 2 years, you need to increase your capital to minimum amount that is being prescribed as per the Act. Now, on the basis of control, let's now try to understand the controlling factor. Now, Johnson & Johnson is the controlling company. That's a very big multinational company. Most of you might know it. It's the leading company in terms of baby care products. Under Johnson & Johnson company, these are the holding company, the Janssen Pharmaceutica, the Depu Synthesis, the LifeScan, which is also a part, the Actelion, which is another company, Neutrogena, which is one more, and the Ethicon, which is also the part of the Johnson & Johnson company. Now, what is these companies doing is that basis of control. Now, Johnson & Johnson company is the holding company which holds all the 6 company. So, whatever control that needs to be exercised by the latter, that is the holding company, shall be done on all these companies. What they will try to do here is that they will try to put in the value, they will try to put in the factor of who should be there, what kind of products, what is the marketing scenario, what kind of strategies. Every single factor shall be held by the holding company, and they will discuss what needs to be done at what point of time. Moving forward, we will also talk on the basis of ownership coming into picture. Now, the basis of ownership is a very, very interesting factor. Now, let's take a government company and none other than our Hindustan Aeronautics Limited company located in Bangalore, said to be a premier agency set up by the government, a premier institution set up by the government, which focuses for the Indian Air Force in terms of building up our air strength, that is in terms of the Air Force weaponaries and all other system technology and factors. So this is a government company where we see that 51% of the company's holding comes under the government control itself. So that means the majority holder of this company comes in under the purview of the government. So the Hindustan Aeronautics, which contributes for the development of the Indian Air Force, is directly under the government of India itself. Now, what happens here is that the government of India here says up very clearly that, the paid up share capital, 51% is held by the government. So no private agencies can suddenly come over, take over the company and say that we are becoming private. These are all government aided companies. So you will hold the entire power there. Now, the central government or any state government are mostly held partly by the state government and central government. So if you see this company, it is a whole long hold by the government itself. Now, for example, railways also. Railways is again held by as a state government enterprise by the respective division, but then no private agency can claim a ownership on railways unless and until it is divested. But until then, these are all companies which are held purely by the government of India. So any decision that needs to be taken has to be taken by the central government. So the central government will nominate people to the board, they will nominate the directors, they will nominate the functionaries who can come forward and take decision on behalf of the company. But any private agency or a third party agency cannot take over this company or make any changes. So that's why what happens here is that the subsidiary of a government company is also called a government. Now, for example, Indian Telephone Industry, Hindustan Aeronautics, or you might have companies under BHEL, BEML. These are all companies which are being held directly by the government itself. They are all being created for the beneficiary of the governmental fact. Now, there are companies, government companies, which will have their shares which are publicly traded like BHEL, BEML, HAL, or the IRC. These are all companies which will have their trading happening in the public also, NTPC. Now, even those company shares will be publicly traded in the stock exchange. But 51%, that is the majority of holding, will come under the government of India. That is why they are called as purely government companies. With this, I come to the end of this session. I hope and believe that all the information shared in this session is of a high use and resource to you. In the upcoming session, we will be talking about the multinational company, transnational companies, which is of a great importance today because these companies have got a global presence and these companies have been doing a great job in terms of their brand image and equity. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me on this wonderful session.